This exercise is a basic production of departmental budgets. Product X has a selling price of £110 per unit and the following demand and inventory. Month January, February, and March. Sales demand is 400, 300, and 600 units. It should say units somewhere. Opening inventory 50, 30, and 80, and closing inventory is 30, 80, and 60. All of this is units. Material X requires 3 kg of material ZD per unit at a cost of £10 per kg. Stock inventories of material ZD units are 400. There's nothing for February and March. And closing is 350, 450, and 700. There's a reason why there's nothing there. Labor is 8 hours is required for unit of X, and the cost of the labor is £12 per hour. Calculate the following monthly budgets. We have sales budget in quantity and value, production budget in units, materials usage budgets in kilograms, material purchase budget at cost, and then labor budget in labor and cost. X, Y, and Z. And the first one is sales budget. Sales demand. And sales budget in this case is your sales demand. Easy peasy. But it's not as easy in real life, so I'll explain that bit. Obviously, in the question is given. However, in real life, it's very tricky to get the sales demand, and that is the main problem of budget setting. Is something called principal budget factor. Okay, and sales is most of the time is principal budget factor for every organization, and that means your budgeting process starts from the principal budget factor. That's your starting point. So once you establish your principal budget factor, your process can flow, and we'll see that in this case how it flows. But first you need to do that. So in real life, you will have two scenarios. Scenario number one is you are a new organization. This is your first year, and you have to estimate how much should you produce. That is going to take a lot of effort. Some market research, our production capacity, our marketing budget, and economic situations of the area where your business is, where your shop is. How good are you in selling? How good is your product? So there are a lot of variables when you're setting up your first sales budget. And it is important. You can't just start just like that, because you need cash to run the business, and your cash depends on your budgeting basically. If you have a business already in existence, you have traded last year, you have sold few things last year, then setting up the sales budget is simply about adjusting the actual figures for the next year. So if the economy looks good, then you can add a bit of percentage. If the brand get more popularity, then you can add a bit of that for that as well, and you could increase it by 10% or 20%, depending on your marketing and production capacity as well. You can actually add up. So basically, this budget, this increase in the budget needs to be in line with our strategy for the next 5-10 years. And then it's broken down into tactical. So this budget for the annual budget would be based on our 1 year tactical level budget, and then it will be broken down into months. Yeah. So that's the situation with sales demand. It's pretty simple in this case, but in real life there are quite a few ifs and buts in determining this figure. So sales budget in pounds. So we have the same price throughout the 3 months. And we get our sales budget. For most of the businesses, sales is their principal budget factor. They can produce as much as they can sell, but every organization has a maximum capacity on selling. After that, they want people to sell more units. Except there was a time when Apple was the situation. They couldn't produce as much as they could sell. There was a time when there was queues outside their stores. Still, I think there's some people who would queue outside Apple when the new model is coming. I don't want to call them crazy, just to be on the safe side. The time when production capacity for Apple was principal budget factor, and the budgeting process would start, okay, how much can we produce? And then going even further down, your budgeting is basically limited on 3 things. Basic. One is material, other one is labor, and the third one is money. Obviously, you produce first and then you sell. So there's a bit of gap between producing and selling. So first you need to invest and then you need to sell. If you don't have cash to produce, then you'll stop producing. So that is one limiting factor, which is coming up next. So that is principal budget factor. Apart from that, sometimes you don't have labor available. So I used to work in pharmaceutical company, and we used to have an issue with the availability of the labor with the right skills. Again, in IT industries, we have this issue even nowadays and so on. So when that's the case, then first you calculate how many hours you have available, and then accordingly you see, okay, how many products you need to produce, and then how many hours you're going to allocate to each product and so on. And the third is raw material, you see. So that is also a principal. That could also be a principal budget factor. So this was the case with actually smartphones production at a point. And that was the element which is used on the touch screens. It's not in unlimited supply. There's a limited supply. There are only a few mines actually who get that. There are only a few factories who actually process that material. So there was a point actually when that was not available. So the production was based on that okay, how many screens can we produce? And then you must have heard last year there was a shortage of carbon dioxide. How funny is that? But there was a shortage of carbon dioxide in the UK, and there were no soft drinks. They were in short supply. Yeah. So again, your production could be based on what is in limited. So that's your principal budget factor. I think that point is very clear now, that what is your principal budget factor. Our sales budget is done, and you will see the coordination and communication of the activities and the targets between different organizations. So once sales budget is done, sales department is going to communicate the targets to the production department, because they are going to, we are selling 400 units in X, we need 400 units. So then production budget starts. Production department is going to look at production budget. Okay. So production budget, the starting point for production budget is sales demand. And the sales demand is 400, oops. as. Now, normally companies, they have some stock left as well. Okay, so they have an opening stock of the finished products. So opening is should say opening stock or inventory. With globalizations, a few things have gone a lot more confusing. Stock in US are called shares. In UK, we still call it stock, but stock is inventory. So inventory is more of a US terminology. So we have 50, 30, and 80. 80. So what we need to understand here, and we need to understand this point basically to work this out. If you are going to sell 400 units in a month and you already have 50, how many are you going to produce more? 350, yeah? So what we need to do, we need to reduce less. We need to minus opening, okay? So I'm going to add less here. That's less, yeah? And then we have add closing, because we need to have that stock in our storerooms at the end. So closing. Inventory. And that is 30, 80, 60. 30, 80, and 60. So 400 less opening plus closing. So that is our production budget, folks. Now, production department knows how many units they need to produce, but they need two elements to produce these units, labor and raw material. So number 3 would come that how much raw material. First, we need to calculate how much raw material are we going to use, okay? So raw material usage budget, and product X requires 3 kg of material ZD. So let's calculate how much. And again, this depends on production department. So one production department knows how much they're going to produce. They're going to communicate this to our raw material our procurement department. $380, $350, and $580. Material kgs per unit, 3. So we have raw material usage budget, and let's write down kgs there. Times so we get, that's how much we need to we will use. Do we need to buy all of this? This would depend on how much we already got in our storerooms. So same process as we use in production budget, we're going to apply the same equation to raw material. So if you look at raw material inventory, We have 400 kgs in January at the start. So see, I'm going to just copy and paste, Control C. The benefits of working on Excel. So 400 of that, and we have 350, 450, and 700. And March. Now some are still wondering how closing of one month is opening of the next month. Okay, so whatever you have on 31st of January, you're going to have exactly the same on 1st of February, you know, if you didn't sell anything in the middle. So our oh, we're almost done. Oh, that's a shame. Okay, so that's our raw material. Purchase budget. Man. Okay.